We start this show on Mondays with one segment. It is time to go around the league and discuss each and every NFL game from week number 7. I love talking about each and every team for a minute or two, giving you guys my perspectives on all of the 13 games that went on during week number 7 of the NFL. So, hit the music. Without further ado, let's do this thing around the league. NFL Week 7 edition. Here we go. Thursday Night Football, the Cleveland Browns with a big 17-14 win over the Broncos. Without Baker Mayfield, without Nick Chubb, without Kareem Hunt, Cleveland was super banged up going into this one, and I really do think this was a game that if the Browns wanted to make the playoffs, given just how good and just how deep the AFC is as a conference right now, this was such a big game for the Browns because, look, they were super disappointing in that game against the Arizona Cardinals. And even though the Broncos got off to a really good start at 3-0, they really weren't playing an NFL schedule. They legitimately played 3 of the worst teams in the league, and then they play Baltimore, they play the Raiders, and they just get absolutely destroyed. I do think that the Broncos need a quarterback, and Vic Fangio is on the hot seat right now. It is not looking good. If you're Denver, Teddy Bridgewater, you just need an upgrade at that position. He's an elite level backup, but not a starting quarterback if your team wants to win, and if your team wants to win big. Good job by Cleveland. I'm still not 100% confident in what their future holds. They need to get healthier, and I don't think the downgrade from Case Keenum to Baker Mayfield is that big. Honestly, I was impressed with how Case Keenum did leading the team, and how about Dearness Johnson? 22 carries, 146 yards, and a touchdown. What a story. Good win for the Browns, keeping themselves in that AFC playoff picture and that race in the AFC North. The Packers beat the Washington football team by a final score of 24-10. Good win for the Packers. They are now sitting at 6-1 following that debacle of a Week 1 game against the New Orleans Saints. I've said it multiple times on this show. I've been really impressed with, since that game against the Saints, the Packers' effort to bounce back, and even when they're in close games, even when they're in adversity, they always just find a way to win, especially in the regular season. I know that ultimately this Packers season is going to depend on how they do in the playoffs, but they are just running away with the NFC North once again, and Washington is just so disappointing. They are another team that needs a clear quarterback upgrade going forward. I thought Taylor Heineke would be good enough to win a somewhat weak NFC East with what they had, but clearly Dallas is the better team. Washington doesn't have a chance to win games when their defense is playing like one of the worst units in the league, and that's exactly what happened. The Washington football team, after one decent year of winning the division, keep in mind with only a record of 7-9, even with good playmakers like Gibson and McLaurin, the Washington football team is not good right now, and I do think their defense has a lot to do with it. They are now sitting with a record of 2-5. How about the Tennessee Titans? And we're going to deep dive into this game a little bit later. They flat out destroy the Kansas City Chiefs and win that game by a final score of 27-3. And it's funny because Patrick Mahomes just did not play well in this game, and he still is fine. I do think that even though the Chiefs have really been struggling, their defense and really their coaching are the main concerns with me for Kansas City. Mahomes isn't playing as elite as he was at times throughout the start of his career, but I still think he is the best quarterback in the NFL. He will be fine, but the Chiefs just turn the ball over way too much. And when you have a defense that is as bad as theirs, you're just not going to win many football games that way. And we're going to dive deeper into Kansas City's problems the last segment of the show. But good win for Tennessee. In a span of 6 days, even though both games were at home, if you were to tell any Titans fan before the start of the season that in back-to-back weeks, in a span of 6 days nonetheless, they would find a way to beat Buffalo and Kansas City, I understand Kansas City is not playing well right now, but that's a big win for any team. And the fact that Tennessee blew them out 27-3, it was great to see A.J. Brown finally get involved. He looked healthy, and when he is out there balling, he's a game changer. He really helps out Ryan Tannehill. Derrick Henry didn't even embarrass the Chiefs defense as much as many people expected him to, and they were still able to find a way to win. I'm impressed by the Titans. I want to see what they do next week in a big road game against the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts playing much better after their win on Sunday Night Football against the 49ers. That game, if Tennessee could win on the road in Indy, it might just give them the path to the AFC South crown. And look, up until a couple weeks ago, I didn't consider Tennessee as a legitimate threat in the AFC, but their defense holding Kansas City to only 3 points, their offense continuing to roll, they're absolutely a threat right now. Good win for the Titans. The Falcons, they win their second game in a row to move to 3-3. They beat the Dolphins in South Beach by a final score of 30-28. And Matt Ryan looked good in this game. 336 yards, 2 touchdowns. I will give Tua Tagovailoa credit, given everything happening in the news off the field with the Miami Dolphins just always finding their name right in the middle of the Deshaun Watson rumors. That has to be a hard position for a young quarterback like Tua Tagovailoa to be in. But at the same time, he played well in this game. The problem with the Miami Dolphins is not Tua right now. It is way more than him. And I like Brian Flores. He did such a good job with this Dolphin team throughout his first 2 years. However, year 3, when we finally put some expectations on his plate, he has not been able to get the job done. Chris Grier, in my opinion, is looking at the hot seat, given that he drafted Tua over Justin Herbert. I know that Tua isn't terrible. He's played all right the last couple games, but the bottom line is this. You're going to get judged by wins and losses, and you lost to the Jaguars. You lost to the Falcons. These are games that if you're the Dolphins, you just need to find a way to win. And now Chris Grier, after getting Jalen Waddle, they thought he was the missing piece. And look, I like Jalen Waddle. He's a good player. But you don't have a first-round pick now, which is not good considering you're 1-6, and you are nowhere close to being a good team. I think what not a lot of people realize is even if the Dolphins do get Deshaun Watson and he's all cleared and ready to play, are the Dolphins a team that with him, are they good enough to win football games? I still don't think so. Probably, besides Kansas City, the most disappointing team in the NFL right now goes to Miami. And look, with the way the Panthers are playing, the Falcons are climbing their way up in the NFC South standings. Kyle Pitts looks like he's pretty good. I still really don't like the fact they took a tight end with the number 4 overall pick when realistically they're not very close to winning big. But hey, the Falcons have always been a team that could put up a lot of points. We know their defense isn't good, and they find a way to go into Miami and win 30-28. How about the Patriots? They beat the Jets by a final score of 54-13. And man, Bill Belichick just loves running up the score on the New York Jets. And look, the thing as a Jet fan that bothered me the most about this game is the main problem with the Jets throughout the start of this season has been the fact that with the rookie quarterback, there's some talent on this roster, but this isn't the most talented roster in the league. This is not a roster that could afford to just game after game get off to a 17-0 deficit. Before you blink, the Patriots were up 14-0 in this game. When you have a rookie quarterback who is now injured, by the way, we hope Zach Wilson gets hurt, but that is the last thing as a Jet fan you wanted to see. The Jets have now lost Zach Wilson, Carl Lawson, Mekhi Becton. This Marcus May has been banged up. C.J. Mosley didn't play in this game. There's so many guys for this Jet team that have gone down with injuries. And look, Robert Saleh, I know it's 6-7 games. It really has not been a good start. When the Jets got this guy, I thought he would really provide the energy. That's all he did when he was the defensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers. And instead, he's just been on the sideline. We haven't seen anything. Coach LaFleur has not done a good job getting this offense off to good starts. Zach hasn't really been efficient. And now the Jets have to give up draft capital for Joe Flacco. When you have a young quarterback, you have to do your best to put him in a good position to succeed. And the New York Jets have really done the exact opposite. Mac Jones looked all right in this game. Once again, he's not a quarterback that's going to really throw the ball more than 15 yards. But for the first time all season, it really did seem like the Patriots were finally able to get a little bit of a running game going, which is a huge help, especially when you have a young quarterback like Mac Jones. Damian Harris looked like the real deal. New England's weapons still don't scare me, but I feel like their defense is good enough to just keep them in a lot of games. So good job by Mac Jones and Bill Belichick. We always know he just absolutely hates the Jets and will run up the score on them every time he gets. The New York Giants, they beat the Carolina Panthers at MetLife Stadium by a final score of 25-3. Daniel Jones out here making one-handed catches for Big Blue in this one. And for the first time all season, the New York Giants defense looked like the unit that we were able to see last year win them some football games by themselves. Like, the Giants defense was a top 12 unit in the NFL last year, and they brought back a lot of the same names, but up to this point, it hasn't necessarily performed. But they really shut down Sam Darnold, who, by the way, the Panthers were my team. I predicted them to make the playoffs before the start of the season, and after their 3-0 start, they were looking really good. But since Christian McCaffrey has gone down, this just has not been the same team, and I still like Matt Rule. I still believe in him as a head coach, but it's just frustrating. I watched the New Orleans Saints on Monday Night Football, and I don't think they're significantly better than Carolina, even considering Carolina beat them on the same field. But the Panthers' offensive line has really regressed. Their defense has regressed, and their quarterback got benched for a guy who played in the AAF. Like, that one interception Darnold threw literally right into the hands of the New York Giant defender. Unacceptable. And maybe what we saw with the Jets, we saw Sam Darnold return to his former confines, his former home field at MetLife Stadium, and he, like so many times he did in a Jet uniform, put on a clunker in a game that I thought the Carolina Panthers really needed to have. That was a disappointing loss for Carolina, a disappointing performance by Sam Darnold. The Panthers are in trouble after a 3-0 start, just like the Broncos. They are now sitting at 3-4. How about the Cincinnati Bengals? The biggest winner of week number 7, in my opinion, was Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and the Bengals, who went into Baltimore, beating the Ravens by a final score of 41-17. Jamar Chase in this game, ready for this? 8 catches, 201 yards, and a touchdown. And this guy is unbelievable. He's really averaging 100 yards a game, and the Bengals look legit. Their defense is one of the more undervalued units in the league. It's one of the more surprising units in the NFL, and they schooled Baltimore. We all know it, guys. The Ravens were one of the hottest teams in the NFL going into this game. We saw what they were able to do to a very good Charger team, and the Bengals, what makes the NFL so great is every year there's a team that just comes out of absolute nowhere and finds themselves in the playoffs. We know the history of the Cincinnati Bengals. This is a team that has not won a playoff game since the early 1990s, and they have a guy in Joe Burrow at quarterback who is an absolute superstar, and with him and Jamar Chase, they're going to go as far as those guys take the Bengals. I'm not totally concerned about Baltimore. I'm just telling you, the Bengals are legit. For them to go on the road in this spot, not only win, but they dominated the Ravens. What a performance by Joe Burrow. What a performance by the Bengals. Let's move on to the 4 o'clock games. I've been really impressed with what the Las Vegas Raiders have been able to do the past 2 weeks since John Gruden was let go. And it's funny because when a situation like that happens, one of two things could go down. The Raiders could just quit. No one really expected John Gruden to resign until it really happened, and that second report with all the emails came out. But it's clear, the Raiders' working environment and the feel around their team with John Gruden in charge, it was just a little weird. Things had to be a little tense. John Gruden is the kind of guy that just walks around the locker room throwing F-bombs. It's a little bit of an environment, I've heard, that was just tense. And we saw the couple executives who left the Raiders prior to the start of the season. The Raiders, you see it in Derek Carr's face, have just been a more relaxed team since John Gruden resigned. And Rich Bisaccia has done a really good job having this Raider team totally ready to play in their first 2 games without Gruden. And all of a sudden, Derek Carr is back to playing like an MVP candidate. Listen to this, 31 of 34, a very accurate performance for DC, 323 yards, 2 touchdowns. The only concern I would have if I'm a Raider fan is, as much as you love Josh Jacobs, this guy always has trouble staying healthy. And the fact you were able to put up 33 points without a guy like Darren Waller in the lineup, that's a really good sign, in my opinion, if you're a Raider fan going forward. I'm not too thrilled with the Eagles. They're now sitting at 2-5. The more I watch Nick Sirianni, the less I like him. Miles Sanders was injured in this game. It's looking like he's going to be out a couple weeks. Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott are now going to be expected to carry the load for the Eagles. I think they're done 2-5. As much as I like Jalen Hurts, I think he could be a fine backup in the league. I think the Eagles need to find themselves a franchise quarterback going forward to give themselves a legitimate chance to win football games. How about the Los Angeles Rams? They beat the Lions by a final score of 28-19. There were some major storylines going into this one. Matthew Stafford and Jared Goff facing off against their former teams respectively. And it's interesting because when you look at the Rams in this game, it was competitive. The Lions were able to be a little bit more competitive than most people thought. Dan Campbell was able to pull out all of the tricks, going with an onside kick, going with a fake punt, really coaching this game like it was Madden in real life. But the Rams were just too good. Matthew Stafford is just that much better than Jared Goff. We know why the Rams were so intent on making an upgrade at the quarterback position when they did a decent amount of winning throughout Jared Goff's time under center. But listen to this. Cooper Kupp, 10 catches, 156 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like Jamar Chase, he is one of the 5 best wide receivers in the NFL right now. The chemistry that he's instantly gained with Matthew Stafford has been very impressive. Robert Woods continues to get going. How about Penei Sewell finding himself in the middle of a scrum with Aaron Donald? For a rookie to be doing that, I give him props. But nice job by the Rams. They're now 6-1, and still somehow, some way, they are not in first place in the NFC West, thanks to the Arizona Cardinals. They beat the Houston Texans by a final score of 31-5. Arizona got the let up the safety to start off this game. Houston was up 2-0, but in the second half, Arizona outscores Houston 14-0. DeAndre Hopkins finds the end zone in his first game against his former team. Zach Ertz with 3 catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown in this game as well. Arizona, they mean business, and they have the big Thursday night game at home against the Packers coming up this week. It's looking like Devontae Adams and others for the Packers are not going to be out due to COVID-19 and protocols there. Adams was actually placed on the COVID list. He's going to need 2 negative tests in the next couple days in order to play. That's looking unlikely. But look, Cliff Kingsbury always has the Cardinals ready to play. It's the Houston Texans, so this game didn't necessarily tell me that much. But Arizona's looking like a playoff team. They're looking like a team that is going to be right on top of the NFC. And when you look at this conference as a whole, the 5 of, in no order, Arizona, the Rams, the Cowboys, the Packers, and the Buccaneers, the playoffs between those 5 teams are going to be absolutely insane. I think the other 2 spots in this conference are pretty wide open. Maybe the Saints and the Vikings have the edge going forward. But that was an impressive job by Arizona, really showing no mercy against Houston. Speaking of no mercy, Tampa Bay crushes Chicago, beating the Bears by a final score of 38-3. And the one thing I'll say starting off with this game is if I were that fan that somehow, some way got the Tom Brady 600th ball from Mike Evans, wouldn't you have just ran with it and sold it online? Make sure you and your loved ones are taken care of, and everyone would have had the opportunity to buy and bid on that ball, including Tom Brady. I know the deal. He got a $1,000 gift card to the Buccaneers team shop. Mike Evans gave him a jersey, and it was also cool to see Tom Brady engage with that fan who had the sign saying that Tom Brady helped him beat cancer. But I will say, the Bears were disappointing in this game. Justin Fields never legitimately had a shot to compete. The Bears' offensive line was an absolute joke. And once again, Tampa Bay's front 7 really does a good job shielding the fact that their secondary is just super banged up. It was funny to see Richard Sherman on the sideline as a legitimate coach. And Tom Brady's just playing so well at this point in his career that the Buccaneers are still a team that you can't mess with going forward. It was crazy to see Tom Brady on the Manning cast last night saying that it was like a specific deed or specific characteristic about a Saints corner because the Buccaneers have the Saints next week. The GOAT is just wired differently. He always has football on his mind. He is just smarter than you. He wants it more than you. He is willing to work harder than you, even at this age. Impressive job by the Buccaneers getting the job done over Chicago. The Bears' offensive line needs to be better. Matt Nagy actually tested positive with COVID, so he's going to be out. It's looking like next week against the 49ers as well. I'm going to be curious to see how the Bears respond to that. Sunday Night Football, the Colts defeat the 49ers 30-18. I wanted to dig deep into this game later in the show. Talk about Jimmy Garoppolo, Kyle Shanahan, and everything going on with San Francisco. And the weather in this game was terrible. The rain really coming down in the Bay Area. It was one of the better rain football games I remember. I know it wasn't a great game, but the weather made it at least somewhat enjoyable in my opinion. I was impressed with Carson Wentz in this one. He has been playing much better than I think people have realized with this Indianapolis Colts team, with Frank Reich, considering the injuries he was dealing with before the start of the season as well. But he finished this game 17 of 26, 150 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. And he was just clearly the better quarterback than Jimmy G in this one. And even though the Titans are playing really good football, I don't think the Colts should be a team we forget about just because they are always a team that never starts off the season well, especially under Frank Reich. And then all of a sudden, you turn around and they find themselves right back in the playoff conversation. This was a good win. They're now sitting at 3-4 after 7 weeks. And then finally, Monday Night Football, the Saints defeat the Seahawks by a final score of 13-10. By the way, with San Francisco, if you want their perspective, we're going to get into the 49ers later in the show, talking about Jimmy Garoppolo and Kyle Shanahan. And then going back, Monday Night Football, the Saints beat the Seahawks by a final score of 13-10. This game was ugly. I think the Seahawks are in trouble. And watching this game, it kind of became a little bit clear to me why Russell Wilson may have been wanting out of Seattle during the offseason. The Seahawks' identity on offense should be Russ throwing deep to Metcalf, Russ throwing deep to Lockett. And I understand Geno Smith was under center in this game, so your game plan is obviously going to be a little bit different. But Pete Carroll is just obsessed with running the ball. Shane Waldron, the new Seahawks offensive coordinator, who they got from the Rams, I thought was going to be a big difference maker from this team, at least making their offense a little bit more modern. But then somehow, some way, this offense looks worse than it did last year with Brian Schottenheimer running things. I mean, at least the Seahawks offense for the first 8 weeks of last season looked elite. It looked like one of the better units in the league. So far, that hasn't happened. Decent win by the Saints. I still don't necessarily trust Jameis Winston and Sean Payton going forward, but the Saints defense is good. Alvin Kamara is a star, and there's no one really else in the NFC that I think could make the playoffs just because of the Saints' record right now. They're sitting at 4-2. I mentioned them, the Vikings, as the two teams I think would have the best path to the final 2 playoff spots in the NFC after the top 5. But we'll see what happens. I think the Saints are one of those teams that could really beat anyone or lose to anyone on a week-in, week-out basis. That was Around the NFL, week number 7 edition. Zach Kroll, Sports Podcast.